Hey Grandmasters, Mike from the WCA. I want to show you guys three games that were played 2 weeks ago. If you remember, we played from that set position called the Gingy Indian defense, which I will show you shortly. And I'm going to show you three examples of where each player lost the game by missing really basic tactics, simple checks, myself being one of them. The key to remember, guys, here is the whole purpose of showing this video or this position was to get you into a very, very foreign opening or completely like upside down structure that you've never seen before. And this is a great example of that. Let's go through the opening real quick. So we have E4, D4 rather, pardon me, I can't read anymore. D4, G6. And this is kind of a modern way to play. Sometimes they'll call this a hyper-modern way, depending on what kind of book you're reading, because black has every intention of controlling the center with a bishop from a distance, as opposed to putting a pawn in the middle. And in the 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock video, I told the students to be careful about doing that. I kind of prefer them to put a pawn in the middle on move 1 to fight for the center. Now, you guys at 4 o'clock, because you're advanced and higher rated, should have an idea that it's okay to do anything you want in chess as long as you're following the basic principles at some point. Center control, minor pieces, castle. Okay, so white plays c4, bishop g7, knight c3, and now like a Benoni move, sometimes they'll call it, this pawn break c5. The idea is to obviously either exchange on this square. Sometimes you can get Sicilian structures depending on how black continues and white continues. Because if I play c5 and take on d4, that's exactly what I do in an open Sicilian. So the fact that there's a c pawn here could turn it into certain variations of a Sicilian. But again, the whole idea is to just challenge white on this d4 square. And one way to handle this for white is to play the move d5, which eliminates the chance to take, gains space, but it opens up this bishop. And it was thought for a long time that, well, I'm not afraid of this because there's no way that black is going to trade off their only developed piece. And this is an absolutely gorgeous bishop. So why would you do that? Well, because we're WCA students and we love this stuff. That's the move that we examined this week. It turns out it's so funny that if you look this up on some of the big databases, black scores really well here. And when you see their next move, it makes it even harder to believe that this can be playable for black. We actually play the move f5. So think about how crazy this is. You give up your only developed piece, like the most beautiful bishop in the world, and then what do you do in your very next move? You weaken the dark squares even more by playing this move f5. And as I explained to class to you, or in class to you, there are some concrete reasons behind this. Black has ways to push this pawn to d6, get this knight to f6, swing this knight around, and you'll notice this cluster of pawns in the middle. Once black plays d6, that pawn cluster is kind of locked. So if white doesn't find a way to either tactically break through or to maneuver a piece to a good square, these two bishops are going to have a hard time getting through this structure, especially considering three of the pawns belong to white. They can't take them. So that's kind of what we went through. So let me show you the three examples that we saw. First of all, my game with Ethan, who, by the way, when he wrote my name in the score sheet, wrote Mikey Meatball. So, Ethan, when I see you in class, we're going to have something to discuss. Crazy kids. So I played E4 against Ethan. I'm just trying to open the game right up in the middle. And I had another reason for playing this way. I was kind of testing him. His rating has really exploded recently, and once I got a losing position, and some of you saw in class, I didn't resign because we were playing with clocks and both getting into time pressure. And what I was trying to do with him is show him the value of continuing games against stronger players when you're winning as you're getting into time pressure. Because a lot of times we lose those games because the stronger player tricks us. Well, not only did I not trick him, he finished the game beautifully, and I just had to resign at some point. So I'm just going to get you to the point where I get a losing position. But why I got a losing position is very instructive. All right, so he takes the pawn, and then I offer him another pawn, which has been played before. And the idea is if he takes it, I just develop rapidly with the knight, and you'll see if this part of the board opens, then these bishops may find some really nice homes in this area of the board, kind of ignoring what's going on over here. But then this little whippersnapper plays a cool move. He plays e3, and he says, no, I'm not going to let you develop quickly. You're going to prove that this pawn on f3 is doing what exactly, and you'll see that it's interfering with the development of my knight. So great move, Ethan. So I take his pawn, and then he plays a thematic move that we talked about in class, queen a5. Tickling this pawn here, as my new hero, Aviv Friedman, says in his videos. I hope you guys are watching them. I think he's really, really good. I protect the pawn from c2 with the queen. He plays d6, opening up his light squared bishop. I played bishop to d3, kind of putting a stop on bishop f5. I don't think he'll come there now. And he plays knight d7, and then knight e2. So here, I was thinking Ethan should have played knight e5, putting some pressure here in the middle. It's a really well-posted piece. But he played knight to b6. I just castled. Bishop to d7. And it's at this point where I kind of took a chance that I'm not 100% sure I would play in a tournament game, because it didn't feel 100% right. There was one trick in the position, but Grandmaster Ethan did not fall for it. I got carried away here, but I had a lot of fun. I played bishop takes g6. Okay, so I'm getting two pawns for my bishop and a check. And he can't really put his king on d8, because after queen g7, white is going to get material back and get an awful lot of play against that king. So Ethan finds the right move. He's really up to the challenge and plays king f8, saying, okay, you gave up a bishop, but you know, now what? How do you get me? So I bring a piece closer. I bring my knight here with the idea of coming into this e6 square at some point, giving up the c-pawn, and it's here where I give the game away. In this position, I played the move rook a to e1, and that's bringing the last piece into the game, which allowed him to take this pawn on c4, and I never got anything going. I tried my best, but I really couldn't attack him. So I was just worse here and eventually lost, but I gave him a hard enough time. Tactically, I kept trying to push and trick, and he answered every one of my tricks with his own. So I thought he played really, really well. However, here's the first mistake of today's video. Well, I guess my sacrifice was the first mistake. But anyway, I should have moved the other rook. The reason for moving this rook here is to protect the bishop, because now if Ethan takes the c-pawn, whether with queen or knight, you have moves like rook to c1, and that gets a little bit tricky. And all of a sudden, white is almost better here, even though he gave up the piece, because where does the queen go? You know, if you keep an eye on the knight from this square, and then there's always these little like annoying moves like pawn a3 cannot be taken with the knight. If you take with the knight, you lose. You can check for yourself, but after knight e6 check, there's another check. I'm saying check a lot. You have to take, and then you have one of these pawn wedges on the 6th rank near the enemy king with Big Mama nearby. Yeah, this is going to end badly for him. But I missed that. I just totally spaced out and put the other rook there. And when I did, you'll see that when he takes this in the game like he did, I can't play, oops, not there, sorry. I can't play rook here because my bishop hangs with check and the game's over. Okay, so there's mistake number one. And if you think about it, I just missed this check, the fact that this is check. So I really needed to keep that piece guarded by something so that this wouldn't have happened. Okay, great job, Ethan. Now let's take a look at Grandmaster Caleb with the white pieces against Andrew. And here, again, white missed the check. That's winning, and this is okay. This is why we do this stuff. So move number 1 was knight f3. Andrew played queen a5, so you guys were paying attention during the lecture. Queen to c2, knight f6, and then a little premature playing on the queen side. Not bad, but it turns out in this structure you can't really mess with the queen that much. Caleb's idea is not a bad one. He wants to bring the rook in and mess around with the queen, but she always is going to find a safe haven or a safe home. And because the structure is so closed, guys, it's very hard to add another piece to the attack. So Andrew plays d6, just like we talked about. Here comes rook to b5. And I really wish you guys, I hope you guys pay attention to this stuff, that when you're starting trouble like this on this side of the board, so, you know, Andrew just steps out of the way, right? Always remember you're starting the trouble with your king sitting in the middle of the board, and you have 2 minor pieces. Well, this one technically is developed, right? We talk about that a lot at the WCA. This bishop has a lot of access to squares, but the bishop on f1 is not doing a thing. So whenever you start playing tactically or tricky chess, try to get in the habit of having the entire army, or as much of it as possible, putting pressure on the board. If you attack me with 1 piece, I can duck. You attack me with 2 or 3, then I have, you know, I have more ways to duck, and it gets harder. Anyway, so queen a6, and then a nice move. Bishop comes out into the game, which could allow for a small tactic. You know, maybe Andrew can snap off that pawn. You know, so if you take it back, obviously the rook will hang. But then, you know, moves like e4 put an end to that, threatening to open up the game big time. Opens up the light square bishop, and for the price of a pawn or a half a pawn, white is going to start having some fun. So keep an eye out for that stuff. So Andrew decides not to and plays an excellent move. He plays knight to e4. You know, so at any time you can pause this video just to get a feel for, you know, because it was 2 weeks ago. It might not be as fresh in your memory, but you guys really handled this well. I was very, very pleased, because trust me, there are masters who see this opening for the first time and they really struggle. I thought you guys did great. Okay, so knight e4. He's willing to let the knight take the bishop and replace it with his own knight, maybe keeping an eye on the e6 square. But, you know, Andrew, to his credit, is probably thinking that this knight is really a monster. I don't want to trade it off. Caleb plays bishop e3. Very good, developing the light squared bishop. Bishop to d7, hitting the rook. The rook makes a run for it. It's like I said before, guys, it's hard to trap that queen in here. Although right now she is kind of awkward. She's not doing a whole lot. So, you know, Caleb's plan is good too. I thought this was great. So Andrew's, well, let me get my queen back in the game. Pressure the pawn. And they go for this little idea. Rook takes pawn. And then Andrew has a chance of winning his own pawn. Except he took it the wrong way. He took by knight takes c3. And that was a really risky move to play because of queen d2. So exclam for Caleb picking up this pin. He's got an excellent position now. It turns out that trouble is on the way very, very quickly. Bishop a4. So Andrew's just trying anything at this point. I think he realized this pin was going to be a real annoyance. Plus, you know, he's having a hard time getting this knight into the game, but bishop a4 loses instantly, and Caleb missed it. So again, just like I did in my game with Ethan, look at every check and capture, even the ones that are a move away. Like with my game with Ethan, I should have anticipated that his queen could have taken my bishop check. And it looks like I took care of that, but I really didn't. I should have looked 2 moves ahead. So here, look at every check and capture. So all Caleb has to do is play rook takes e7, and it's pretty much curtains for white. He's already, for black rather, he's in big trouble. After king f8, maybe a move like bishop d3, and this is not pretty. So, you know, just put some highlights on. King is ready to castle. The bishop is looking at this pawn, and don't say, well, it's only a pawn, why would you sack your bishop? Any sacrifice like this can be devastating when it opens vertical lines on both sides of the king. Remember, there's a queen up here at some point. When this king moves, you know, you might play e4 and she might jump in on one of those lines. So this bishop could be a factor. This knight is in the game. You still have the pin here. The bishop holding the rook. The bishop could come into this square at some point. So clearly, white would be in great shape. But Caleb blundered, which happens the same way I did, he did. And instead of taking the... let's go back here. Instead of taking the pawn check, he played rook to b5. So I think, I don't know if he was setting a trap or looking for, you know, what exactly hitting the queen, but, you know, the bishop just took and he gave up an exchange, and then the queen was able to protect the knight from here, and black went on to win the game. Okay, let's take a look at one more. So this is Ben and Matthew playing. Ben has white, and here Ben played d6. So let's go back to the starting position. And I had Irina Krush, U.S. Women's Champion and Grandmaster Irina Krush, play this against me many years ago. I wonder if she would remember the game, because after she said it was the first time that anyone played it against her, but she wasn't even a master yet. She was just a strong expert. And then she had this played against her, I believe, at the U.S. Women's Championship. I may be mistaken, but I do know she's played against it as a grandmaster. But she chose the move d6, which gives this knight this beautiful square. But there's a plus side. It kind of ties this pawn up a little bit, which makes it hard to get this guy out. Okay, knight f6. Ben played f3, so he's probably looking to expand with e4, I guess. Queen a5, again the thematic move. Queen d3, protecting the c-pawn. Knight c6, taking advantage of the square that I just talked about. And then the queen moves again. And she moves again to come after a pawn. Now, Ben and I have had many conversations about swallowing too many pawns. I love Matthew's move. He just castles. And he tells Ben, go ahead, take the pawn, which he does. Matthew blockades the pawn and threatens to take it with the rook. And all of a sudden, black is going to get some play on that E line. Again, guys, same situation as the game with Caleb. The bishop on f1. The king is still on e1. Oops, sorry, mister, you can't do that. Be very careful starting tactics, winning pawns when everything is still in the back rank. Look at this. Big Mama is the only piece in the game. She must be hungry. Okay, so Ben puts his rook on b1, similar to what Caleb did. And queen takes a2. So he kind of missed this. It's like, you know, that's not pawn hunting. That's taking a pawn that's hitting an undefended rook. So the rook went up to b5. Matthew took the pawn on e7, and he's winning here. But I'll just show you a couple of moves of how he got in trouble. Let's go back for a minute right here. This pawn is hanging, and it doesn't seem that there's any clear way for that pawn to be protected by white, right? There's only the queen looking at it, and black is attacking with the knight and the rook. All right, let's stop and think for a sec. Where is white's counterplay? Well, the rook is on b5, attacking a pawn, and so is the queen. So if you know this pawn is going to go and it's going to hit the queen, that's a really good thing. The queen may, in fact, take this pawn. So she's getting out of trouble, and at the same time, she's snapping off a pawn. So what if we played a move like b6 here and just sat on the position? That's a great expression. Let's just sit on the position. You're not really sitting. You're just telling white, I'll take the pawn later, but I'm not giving you any counterplay. I'm going to leave your rook in a box. Nobody can bother my queen. Then I'll grab the pawn, develop my bishop, double the rooks, and black is probably winning or very close to that. But let me show you what happened. He took the pawn. Hey, look, to his credit, it's a pawn. And he's attacking a queen, so I'm not faulting his move, but it did allow Ben to keep his queen in the game. Again, I like this move, b6. Hitting the queen, developing the bishop. You see, guys, these light square bishops that sit around and don't do much, you can get into big, big, big trouble. So what did Matthew replace it with? A queen move, queen to c2. Ben played bishop to d2, and here we get the move b6, which is an effective move, but queen d6 is played, and here again, black is winning. All he has to do here, and this is not, you know, the easiest thing in the world for you guys to see, but if you get that queen out of there, you chase her away and go about your business. You have the e5 square for the knight at some point, and try to visualize why you might want a knight on e5. Can you guys see the yeeks? What's that? That's kind of ugly. And you know, white is already in trouble. It's incredible how fast you can lose a chess game. But if you back the move up for a second here and you replace it with bishop to a6, things change a great deal. Queen takes knight, bishop takes b5, pawn takes, queen check. Ben makes use of this square. Queen takes b5, but a little bit of danger, obviously, because of pawn e3. And this game is pretty equal. Take the queen away in your mind. Just pretend she's off and about. What is white's next move going to be? Do you guys see it? The danger that is facing Matthew right now? And trust me, I ran into the same problem as Caleb. You have to try to anticipate your opponent's next move. So after queen takes b5 and that pawn pushes, Matthew played queen to b2, hitting the bishop. But what did he miss? A check. Okay? And he ended up losing you know, a boatload of material here. Grandmasters, I have to run. I'm very impressed, no kidding. I'm really happy with all the work that I'm seeing this semester at the WCA. Just please remember these lessons as they come across. If you need to write some key ideas down in a notebook, do it. Okay, I'll see you next time.